Again, kingdom greetings and God's richest blessings be multiplied to you and yours. You are tuned into part 2 of Healing Our Land's broadcast, continuing our interview with my friend, my brother, the theologian, and one of his hats, in the person of Ed Gaskins. So you were talking about the selection process for this. It's so incredibly exciting, man. I'm just so pleased that this is happening, that we're taking control of our own narrative as people of color right here in the city of Boston, and honoring our own, in the context of theology, right? The Bible says a prophet is without honor in its own hometown. And I thank God that Boston Praise Radio, our living legend, Pastor Bruce Wall, the only black-owned, FCC licensed, right, multimedia mechanism owned by a black man in the lower level of a church in the inner city, right? We've got so many legends right here in Boston. And so we do celebrate our own. And here on this platform, we celebrate our own. So again, and very exciting from what I've learned, even in the process of preparing for you to come, as well as what I'm hearing. And so I haven't had the privilege yet of being able to view it, but I will be there. So tell us about what you were talking about, the election process.
So the selection process, I told you how we worked with Mother Caroline Academy, and that was inspiration for trying to make sure we had representatives from all the different types of careers. So, for example, Ma Dixon is in the list,
wow.
Right? So if you were looking at most lists, you wouldn't see a Ma Dixon.
Right.
We had 2 hairdressers. We had Olives and we had Charlene, right, in terms of prominent black women in the black community, right?
Yeah.
So we had 3 librarians on the list. In fact, you talk about my friend Jamal. At one time he looked, he said, "Can anybody be on this list?" He said, "My grandmother can be on this." I said, "Submit her name." I said, "We'll consider that," because there wasn't any rules that said what they had to do or didn't have to do. And so we looked and picked all kinds of community activists if we could find. So like Edna Bino in Orchard Park. Anyway, there's tons of community activists. Mildred Haley was in a different category.
Oh, what category is she?
So think about it this: were you the first person to do something? First person to start something, graduate, finish, whatever. So if you were the first black American woman, usually it was first woman of color, first black woman to do anything, that basically was like, got you most of the way there, if not all the way in. So that was one. Then there was things like, were you on any lists? Anybody's list ever. So there's lots of people who've been compiled lists over time.
Sure.
So those were nominations. Those weren't necessarily selections. Mm-hmm. Then there were all the community activists, as many as we could find. And then there were people who had things named after them. Mm-hmm. So there, of course, the reason why I said that is because you have like the Mildred Haley Apartments. Mm-hmm. And there's like the Anna Cole Center over there. There's Frederica Williams has a building named after her.
Really?
Althea Harris has a building named after her. Rubina Guscott has a building named after her. So Ma Dixon has a square, Ma Dixon Square, mm-hmm. Nellie Yarborough Square.
Nellie Yarborough.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. So again, all the stuff that she did in her denomination as a pioneer. So I'm saying that's what I'm trying to say is broad and comprehensive. So you have like in that category, you have Bishop Barbara Harris, the black woman who's the first black woman Episcopal bishop.
Yes.
So you have her, you have Liz Walker, you have Gloria White Hammond. Yeah. So you have Gloria Fox, but she's with all the elected officials. So you have Mary Good, you have Doris Bunte, you have Charlotte Golar Ritchie, you have Diane Wilkerson.
Awesome.
And so there's Shirley Owens Hicks, Gloria Fox.
Wow.
So you've got like all those people on the elected side. And then, of course, all the communications people. So some could have either way, right? So Liz Walker, but communications. So you have Carmen Fields, you have Liz Walker, you have Sarah Ann Shaw, you have Gwen Eiffel. And again, that's just a few of the ones I'm thinking as I'm sitting here. But so the idea was I couldn't put every elected official in.
Of course.
And that was actually some of the advice from Mel Miller, because but the point was, in order to have your your hairdressers in there. You couldn't put every elected official, so you had to have enough spaces for every kind of field.
Sure.
People from the military, people in the arts. So, there's Grammy winners in there, there's Emmy winners in there, there's Hall of Famers in there. So literally every sort of category you can think of, there's black women that represent that category. At least one. And in some cases, there's lots of them. So that's how the selection sort of worked out, where you were trying to really fill it out. And part of the problem is that we had got to 100, then it was 120, 140, and then sort of 60. I was like, okay, how is this going to work? Because I only have 100, and I have way more people that meet the criteria. And so I with consultation with a few people, like my board or whatever, I told them I was expanding it to 200. Which was not an easy decision because I had a hard enough time getting funding for it in the first place. So if you can imagine, I know you can't imagine this, but just pretend that you're going to one of the big foundations in Boston and you're saying, okay, what I want to do is I want to put pictures of 100 black women on light poles in Grove Hall or on Bluehill Avenue. And so they were like, what kind of project is this? Like, is it placemaking? No, it's not really placemaking. Is it public art? It's not like a sculpture. It's not a mural. It's not what we think of as public art. Is it black history? Nah, not really. Like, we don't even have a category for this project. So it's like, no. So I thought, oh my God, it took me a long enough time to get the funding for the project in the first place. And now, instead of having it 100% funded, now it's going to be 50% funded. And so I'm going to have to go out and raise the other 50%, the other half of the money. The good news, here's the good news on the first part, is that the Kraft family, I'd got an introduction to the Kraft family and the Kraft Family Foundation. And I met with him. I met with Robert Kraft at first. And two things happened. One, when I talked to the person that was, before I talked to him, I had like an introductory person, Dan. He asked if the project was still available. They took a completely different view. They thought it was so good that it would have been taken by somebody by now. So I said, yeah, the project's still available. I met with Robert Kraft, and then I had a 2 or 3 page proposal, and he goes, you've spelled Ruthie Adson's name wrong. You have a typo.
Oh, no.
So I thought, now, how does Robert Kraft know the correct spelling for Ruth Babson in the neighborhood? And anyway, they decided to fund the project. And then I remember I met with Josh Kraft. That was my next call. And he was the one that recommended Edna Bino. So I was like, he told me yesterday how he knew her, but I was like, how does he know some community leader in Orchard Park? Because it just seemed like, and I knew that obviously the Kraft family, particularly Myra, had been very involved in the city over the years. And when I was working with like the 10 Point Coalition and the Black Minister Alliance, that, she made contributions to things like that. I had been with another fundraiser raising money for 10 Point, and we actually met at Robert Kraft's house. So I knew that he was interested in the city and stuff like that, but I didn't know he was like that interested that he would have that level of detail.
Yes.
And would know that. So praise God, he was the funder of the project, or else it would have never got off the ground. Wow. And a lot of times when I tell the story, people just want to brush right over the funder. But I say, if I wasn't a funder, it would still just be a good idea. It wouldn't have come into reality.
Absolutely.
And so when I called him up and I told him I was going to expand the project from 100 to 200, and because that was sort of like a clause in the agreement that said they had the right of first refusal on any sort of expansion and phases and things like that. Okay, and so we met, and they said, well, we're not going to fund the second phase. Do your best, and if you run into some problems, come back to us. And so we had an event at the State House. We did some other things. I started a GoFundMe campaign, and we raised some money. And one day, out of the blue, I got, after there was an article in the Boston Globe about the project, I got a call, an email that said, we have to talk. And it turned out that it was Dan again, my contact with the Family Foundation and the Kraft Family Philanthropies. And he said, we would like to support this project, and whatever you don't raise through the GoFundMe campaign, we will try to help make up the difference. So the point was, go out there, do your best, but there's going to be some fallback if you run into some problems. So I was getting money from the city, state, and all that, and people said yes, but it wasn't coming quickly enough. And I was like, oh man, this is really going to be a problem, because I told them people were going to do this project, and I believed we were going to be able to raise the rest of the money, but I wasn't sure. So I was appreciative of their support all along the way.
That's outstanding. As I was looking at preparing for the interview, and I saw some of the other interviews, and I saw that State Representative Chris Worrell.
So here's what happened with Chris.
Please.
This was back in April, and I had actually it may have been before April, but it was in the spring. And I had all the artwork done, right? So all the artwork of all the 212 women were done. And so the next step was to make the banners. Even though now I had to raise money to do thing, as I just told you. However, I said, geez, if I just do like a ribbon cutting or something, and I put these banners up in the mayor and like 10 people show up, I said, that just doesn't feel like it's going to do it justice for a project of this magnitude. Mm-hmm. So I talked to the mayor about getting some money, and
Mayor
Wu, and she said that she'd be willing to help, but I couldn't figure out where I would get the money or how I'd even have the resources to do like a breakfast, lunch, dinner, this, that, and the other thing. And, rent, even if they gave me the space for free, I would never be able to afford the food. It wasn't in the budget. And I just expanded the budget from 100 to 200, so I couldn't go back and ask now for money for a luncheon or a dinner or something. So I said, I'm not really sure I'm pulling this off. So I actually went to Governor Healy, and I thought she'd be supportive. And I talked to, so here's what happened. This is just characteristic of me. I was trying to do the email thing, call in. I wasn't getting anywhere. I said, well, I'll just have to go there in person. So I just went there unannounced to the doorstep and said, okay, I'm here to talk to the governor.
And she forged your audience.
So what happened is I talked to, I just see this being a station of faith. A person who I knew, but I didn't know that I knew worked there, was for all purposes, the gatekeeper.
How about that? Come on.
And so I told him I was there, what I wanted to do, and he said, oh, no problem. I'll make sure you get connected to the right people, blah, 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 blah. So all that went through. And so then I knew that we were going to do an event at the Great Hall within the State House, right? So now I didn't have to worry about renting a banquet room or here or there someplace.
Yes.
So now I was down to the food. Like, how am I going to pay for the food for this event? And as I was in the process of all this, I ran into Representative Chris Worrell, and I said, oh, here I am. I'm the governor. I'm trying to do this thing. It's at the State House. And he said, Ed, we got you. He said, we can take it from here, basically. And I told him, here's the people I've talked to in the governor's office. Mm-hmm. And so, he worked on scheduling. So originally we were trying to make sure that the governor was there. So we picked a date that she was available. And then we were working on the food. And then there was lots of other stuff that happened. Photography, the MC. So Chris said, Ed, I got you on this thing, So he knew the MC, the woman from Channel 7, black woman. And then... So he knew her. She agreed to be the MC. I was like, how much are they charging us? He's like, we don't worry about this stuff. Photographer.
Was that Crystal Haynes?
No, she didn't do that one. She did a different one. Oh, okay. So JB from JB Studios, and then Chris had his own photographer, excellent photographer. So I wish I remembered his name. I'd promote him on air too. So we had great photographers. And, we got, I think it was the Speaker of the House, the majority leader. He came to speak, and a lot of different state reps. But the main thing is that we had, basically we had enough space for 250 people. We filled all 250 people.
Nice.
And some people were so excited. Mahia Baker Gomez was one of them.
Nice.
So usually we told people, like you could bring like one guest, because we figured if you have 100 people and each person brings one guest, that's already 200 people.
Sure.
And then all the other guests, whatever. Anyway, so she wanted to bring like 20. She was so pleased that she got selected. He's like, okay, we gotta tone this down a bit. But it was really, really, really a great experience. And these are the kind of things that, again, I didn't see or foresee happening. Mm-hmm. So people, think about it, all these black women, right, from several generations were now in the room at the same time.
So all the honorees,
all the honorees and their families.
Nice.
Or in some cases, let's say there were people who had moved away from the area, they sent family representatives. Nice. Or people who were deceased had family representatives. Beautiful. So they were all there. So for example, one of the women that was represented or selected or honored was, listen to this, she was a black woman who was the head of the Black Panther Party in Boston. What? So you're thinking about all black men having a black woman in charge of them, like this sort of male thing in the 60s. Anyway, so for example, so she, did that. She went on and got her PhD in like women's studies, and she was a professor. She's professor emeritus at a college in North Carolina, and so she was incumbent. She sent her family who are still here, and so part of the thing is that literally the event felt like a reunion. So people were like all their peers were from the same age group were here, whether it was the grandmothers or the mothers. Their women warrior colleagues were there. People were talking about family reunions, church reunions, because people were like, oh man, there's 4 or 5 people from my church who are on this list. And they were happy. There was groups of people. So like, for instance, there was probably 6 or 8 black judges. Mm-hmm. And so they hadn't been together in years. So now I had like a judges group. And so you just had all this energy of all these people who were so happy to be reunited once again, all getting this award. Wow. And so Chris gave them like Representative Royal gave them like a citation. Nice. His brother Brian gave them a citation. Beautiful. Yeah, and so, part of what I didn't understand or appreciate at the time, as I said, this is like an award from Greater Grove Main Street. It's like that. Who cares about that? But people were so moved. So, Representative Enriquez, for instance, he told me that because his mother, Sandra, was one of the people that was recognized. He said, she was in tears when she found out that she was selected. Wow. And I said, but she's gone on to such bigger, better things now. Excuse me. I was like, why would they care? Some of these people, if I told you, they're like corporate people, boardroom people, So I said I had all the people from social class. I had people, the woman that led the welfare sit-in, the riot sit-ins that at the welfare office that led to the riots in '67, Doris Bland. And so I had another woman that did Patty Rayner, who did welfare reform as well. So I had people from like the lowest social class to the highest social class. People like Marion Hurd were on the list. Like I said, boardroom people, Benny Wiley, Harold Folk. So you had all these different social classes. You had all these different people of faith, right? 90-something, not different faith traditions. Mm-hmm. You had Nation of Islam, so Sister Virginia, Malcolm X's sister, or half-sister, Ella Collins, they were represented. Anyway, so you had faith traditions, social classes, you had both Democrats and Republicans, you had different people of sexual orientation. So I had lesbian leaders that were on the list. So literally, I felt that there was the widest representation of what the black women leaders in Boston looked like. Like, we didn't exclude anybody.
Nice.
And we didn't have to. The thing is that we didn't pick for people by class. That was a result of how carefully we picked people, that at the end, it automatically came that way. So that was a real blessing.
Wow. And what I understand is that so the banners along the Bluehill Ave have a QR code?
Not yet.
No?
Not yet.
That's going to happen?
That was actually the idea of Priscilla Douglas, the first black woman cabinet secretary. She said, what would be good? Because obviously if you see the banners in the poll, you don't necessarily know who they are because, you don't know black history. You don't know everyone.
Right.
And so she said, if you put a QR code on the pole at street level, then I could see who that was. And because remember, you have all the abolitionists, Underground Railroad people, most people like myself, we don't know who all those people are.
Not at all.
And so you would be like, well, now I can learn about them, or I can make it possible, or a family could go, and you could go from pole to pole, and learn about the people.
So that's something that is something you're going to complement that's not in place as it stands?
That is correct. So I just got that idea. I thought it was a great idea. And then I talked to the people. They said, we can do that. And so I'd love to be able to add that to the project.
That will then give you an education about who is this person.
Right. So there's also some other things. So once it sort of started catching momentum, other people wanted to join in. So Boston Public Library, Northeastern University.
Whoa.
So they wanted to help because they saw this as a special collection. And especially if you look at the names and stuff that people I've already told you, they wanted to make sure that this was captured for history.
Yes.
And so they agreed to try to create Wikipedia pages for everybody that's selected. So now you could, and again, the idea was, how do we make this more accessible for teachers so they can bring this into the classroom? And I've heard some naysayers like, teachers don't have time to teach this. They've got so much other stuff to teach. And so that sort of went back to me, one of my motivations for the project, because people always say, the young people today, they don't have any role models. They don't have any. And I was like, geez, I think we have them. I think we just don't learn about them. We're not learning about them. And, earlier you talked about recapturing our narrative.
Yes.
And so I said, our narrative isn't teachers, doctors, lawyers. No, it's not. I'm not going all the way back to Nubia. I'm just talking about in Boston 40 years ago.
Right.
Just look at all the people and what they've done. Right. So whatever, like I said, whatever the thing is. So I said, I felt that, both black and white media, if not accurately portrayed the cumulative impact of black women, and I think that there's lots of things that come from that once you understand that. So collective advocacy, right, in terms of what is a community that we've done. And, whatever difficulties you have, look at the people and what they've overcome before you. When I was reading certain stories about certain people, so for example, I read about a woman who was a dentist, and she graduated from the same dental school that her colleagues did at Tufts Dental School. But when she got out, she could only get a job as a hygienist working for her classmates and stuff, because she was this black woman. And so what was interesting in her case is there was an opening at the dental practice where she worked at. And so they posted a position that they were looking for a new dentist, right? A new dentist. And in the posting, they said at the end of it, male only. So that she would know, don't even think about applying to be a dentist here. Wow. So what she did is she saved enough money to buy all of her instruments and stuff like that. And then she started to practice out of her home. And so she built a practice that way. And but just the idea is that all the challenges and stuff that she overcame, none of those stopped her from eventually becoming a dentist. There's a story of a woman in there. I like this one because it's so deep in so many different ways. But this woman bought a ticket to the opera, and she bought. This is in Boston, so she bought a ticket to the opera, and she bought it by mail. So when she showed up, they wouldn't seat her in the orchestra section where her ticket was. They wanted to sit her in the balcony in the black section. So she refused because she said, that's not the ticket that I bought. And obviously, because she bought the ticket by mail, nobody knew that she was black. So anyway, they ended up throwing her out, and roughly, as the way the story talks about. So then she sues them, and she wins. But so that's your sort of classic civil rights kind of thing, right? But what's interesting about her is that the reason why she was going to the opera is because she learned to appreciate opera in Italy. And the reason why she was in Italy is because she couldn't get into medical school in the United States. So she went to medical school in Italy. So think about it. You learn another language, you become a doctor in Italy, and then you come back here to practice. And therefore, because of your time in Italy, you have an affinity for the opera. You buy a ticket to go to the opera. Obviously, you have the money for it, and you appreciate it. And then you're not let into your seat because you're black.
Wow. Here in Boston.
This is here in Boston. But I'm just saying, it's like the stories that you read are, you're like, well, wait a second. It's hard enough for people to pass a medical exam in English. Like, can you imagine trying to learn another language?
I cannot.
Or take your education in another language? So there's just, once you read that, it becomes inspiring. So you look at what other people have overcome. There was a woman, she was a hairdresser. And one of the things that's interesting about the hairdressers during this time period is that they were independent because they didn't depend on white money. So all their clientele was black, so nobody could tell them anything. So they were independent. They could riot, protest, march, whatever they wanted to do, and they didn't have to worry about getting fired. And they could also be like leaders in the community. So what do you think? What was interesting? So here's this black woman, and she has a line of beauty products. She has a beauty school. She's a beautician herself. And when you go to vote, what they did is they used to write down what your occupation was to make sure that you didn't double vote or everything like that. So for her occupation, they wrote wife.
Wow.
So it's like just totally minimized, obviously, all of our consequences. So that's what I'm trying to say, going back to your point about taking control of our narrative, is that our history, forgotten, distorted. Now we talk about, if you learn anything about black history or race and racism, that's you're too woke, and critical race theory and all that kind of stuff. And so it feels like you're trying to erase a people's history. And so once you learn the history of all these people and what they were able to accomplish through all the ages, literally through the last 300 years, it can't help but be inspiring. So, for example, something as simple as a person being a runaway slave, I've never really thought about that before. So you're a runaway slave, you make it from the South to here. Now you would think, okay, I'm a runaway slave, there's the anti-fugitive slave law, which means that if I get caught, I can get taken back down south to slavery again.
Yes.
So you'd think, okay, I'm just going to stay indoors. I'm not going to come outside. I'm not going to say boo, because obviously I don't want to be identified.
Sure.
But these were the same women that were the suffragists. These were people who were speaking and rallying people up on the evils of slavery, trying to get people like William Lloyd Garrison or whatever to counter slavery. So you're thinking, geez, that's kind of fearless. Like you have no fear of getting recaptured, or your fear isn't greater than what you believe is the greater good to basically to work towards freedom. So again, you just look at that. Again, all these generations, all these stories, decade after decade, century after century, that brings us up to where we are today.
Amazing, amazing. So is this something that is going to continue, that will be maintained? How long will these banners be there?
So people ask me the banner question all the time, how long they're going to be up. So traditionally, the banners were only up they came down during the winter historically. Mayor Wu's administration is a little bit different. We don't know if they will enforce that or not, or whether that regulation will still exist. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm looking to see, are there places I could actually put them indoors during the winter, or some other places. So one of my ideas, don't know if I'll be able to pull this one off, but who knows, I pulled this stuff off already. I said, wouldn't it be kind of cool if I had in the TD Garden, like from the rafters, so you have all the men, right, all the jerseys, the Celtics and the Bruins, and what if you had like all the black women banners up there, at least for a game? Anyway, so I think that would be one. And I've talked to some other places about potentially doing them. Maybe if you go to the MFA, there's like the food court. There's not enough space there for 200 of them, but what if we did some other things? So I don't know. I'm always open for ideas, but I'd love to have some other places to move them around and then put some others up next spring. So then your other question is, I personally would like to do the next 200. Nice. So I know I told you before I had 600 nominations. So since then I've gotten another I've gotten another 200 nominations that are just as good as the first 200. People say, well, that can't be. No, because they're thinking, okay, well, there can't be that many women, black women, that are that outstanding they're like, oh, if you go another 200, then you're gonna the quality will decline and blah blah blah. I'll say, well, let me just give you a hint of who wasn't part of the first 200. Harriet Tubman is one of the first 200. She wasn't there. I said Sojourner Truth is another one. There's statues of her in Boston. So you have like the Harriet Tubman House. So remember I told you before about things being named after you? Yes. So they have stuff named after them in Boston. They played a role here. They could be the next 200. Malcolm X's wife, the role that she played. Anyway, I can give a lot more examples, but I'm just trying to say that there's plenty. This is what I told somebody. I said, if I only picked one black woman a year, woman of the year, and I picked one, I said, if I pick one a year for 300 years, I'd have to do at least 300. And I'm only at 200. So trust me, there's more black women than I even need to get to another 200. And there's no decline in quality, no deterioration in quality. They're all excellent people. They're just like the first 200. It's just I didn't come across them soon enough.
Sure. We do have a caller. Caller, you are live on the air. Go right ahead. I believe we have a caller on there. There we go. Yeah.
Peace, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
All right. Good afternoon. Good evening. This is Jamal Crawford calling.
I know, my buddy. All right.
All right. So first of all, you say you're open for ideas?
Yes, I got a notepad right now.
Good. This is an easy one.
Okay. There's
Here's
nothing
what we're
easy.
going to do.
Nothing's that easy.
Well, this is relatively easy.
Okay.
Here's what we're going to do. And it's going to be a partnership between the good folks from our Frugal Bookstore, right? My guy Ken Granderson from Black Facts. I think I've told you about him before, Ed, right? Right? Okay. And what we could do is we could turn these 200 banners into flashcards. And now people could have it into their homes, schools, what have you. I will try to source it to keep the price down so it's $20 and under. But, we could have a deck of flashcards with these 200 women that people could be using as a teaching model for their children, whether it's at home, church, school, what have you, community groups, what have you. I think flashcards is the answer.
All right. What's idea number 2?
I will talk with you after about idea number 2 because I cannot reveal that on these airwaves at this time.
Intellectual property.
All right.
Yes.
All right. So I have to give a couple shout outs to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Crawford here. First of all, remember how I told you we used lists to put the things together?
Yeah.
So he had a list of black women that was a poster. Mm-hmm. That was one of the very first lists that we used. Remember Don West, the photographer?
Yes.
So he has a thing of black women in one of his books. Mm-hmm. So we use things like that to build the list.
Outstanding.
Now, when Jamal heard about the project, he sent me this thing, this was cool, and he did a quick mock-up of 2 or 3 people. One of them was Ayanna Pressley, mm-hmm. and there was the picture of the woman, Ayanna, with a crown on her head, and he was trying to emphasize black queens, that we needed to recognize our black queens. Mm-hmm. And that was the message he was communicating. Mm-hmm. And he had the tagline, "Black Women Lead." And when I looked at that, I said, oh my God, I love this. And so I said, I don't know if I can pull the crown thing off, but I love the tagline. So I try to tell people that is the inspiration. Like, that's where the black women lead. Because otherwise, when I did the 6 men I told you about, mm-hmm. it was just portraits. They had no tagline, nothing. It was just a portrait. So mm-hmm. if you go to the Grove Hall Library, you'll just see these banners that are up there. But the whole black women lead thing, I felt that it was like concise. It was to the point. I could get it on stuff. It would work. Mm-hmm. And I thought it captured the spirit. And so that's why I felt that when we were doing the selection, we could use leadership from a broad range, right? So you didn't have to be an elected official. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to say, what about it leading as a role model? Mm-hmm. So, for example, there's a woman on there that had 50 foster children.
Yeah.
So we picked her. So there's a woman on there, Mary Manning, who is who worked for 25 years as a foster grandparent and retired at age 95.
Amazing.
So she talked about, I didn't let these aches and pains stop me. I went into the classroom and gave kids love and all that.
Beautiful.
So I felt like we needed to hold things like that up.
Yeah.
Do you know Leah Randolph?
I don't.
She does the stuff in Black trauma. And so, in her day, she was a Black Panther person herself. Wow. So she's on the list. So we were looking for people who were making contributions different ways. So the co-founders of the Sportsman Tennis, Gloria Smith. So I think about that. If you think about Bluehill Avenue, I've got one woman who's like leading the sit-in at the welfare office. I got one woman who's teaching tennis to kids. I got a woman who's the head of the Black Panther Party. I've got a woman who's the bishop of the church, Nellie Yarborough.
Yes.
And so even if you go down the street today, you'll see this is, even though it's a street over, Thelma Burns, Ruth Hamilton, Elta Garrett, Ellen Jackson from the busing. Frederica Williams, the Beulah Providence. Like, these are people, like, their buildings are something about them. The first grand matron of the Prince Hall Lodge, Masonic Lodge. Like, these are like things. These are all our community right down the street, and so they're all captured.
Amazing.
Now, back to the flashcard thing. So we are working on that, and so I'll just explain where we are in that process. Since we already had the portraits done, then the question was, okay, let's just strip out some of the, like the border and all those kind of things. So it's just the portrait of the person and their name and their credential, MD, JD, EDD, PhD, Reverend, whatever. So their name, their picture, their portrait, their credential, their name, and then what we want to do on the flip side is is a short bio for each person. So what we have is again, because of the portraits and the what we've done, is we have like a 1 paragraph description of each person. Now, what we'd like to do between the 1 paragraph description and the Wikipedia page is try to expand that more. But we thought that we needed something that would just identify who is this person. So if you didn't know who, I don't know, Alfreda Harris or Ruth Rollins, you didn't know who that is, then now you would, because we'd have a little description of her. But now it may not be her complete bio and all of her awards and education and all that, but there'd be something about that. And I agree. I thought that was the kind of thing that would be helpful to be a flashcard or something like that kids could play with, the same way they play with baseball cards and football cards and things like that, except for it would be Black history.
Outstanding. I think it's an incredible idea. So that's one that you've heard this and you're...
Well, we're working on it right now. We're we've just created all the portraits without all the other design work around it, and then we're trying to finish the 1 paragraph bios. That's taking time because the research for these people that are a little bit more obscure is hard to find. But we think that we'll have the rest of that bios done in probably 3 weeks or so, and then we'll try to see if we can't do the design. So people have suggested, do we do a book? Because if you did 1 page per person, you'd already have 200 pages for a book.
Yeah.
And that's a possibility. Some of the families have asked for like a poster that they could potentially have of one of their loved ones and frame it. So we've made that available. There's in different sizes. Like, what size do you want? 8.5 by 11, or do you want 3 feet by 6 feet?
Nice.
In fact, when we were hanging up the banners, a woman who wasn't related to anybody, she was sort of came to the window and she said, "I want one of those." She said, "I'm a Black woman. I was born right across the street. I'm from this neighborhood." And so I thought it was interesting. She didn't care which one it was. She just was identifying that I'm a Black woman, and I want one of these for my living room.
Wow. It's an amazing project. I'm so pleased that, again, that you were able to, to pull this off, that you were able to even think of it, and the input, this is not just taking control of our narrative, though it is that, but the inspiration for, young Black girls to be able to see, and I saw that was inspiring for them to be able to see there are people whom look like them, because we're not hearing this again. This is not the education that people are getting in school.
Yeah. So that what happened, I have to say, I shouldn't say this, to this, but in the Bible, when it talks about God giving you more than you could ask or imagine,
Yes.
I didn't imagine, like when we did the thing at State House, how big that was going to be and how successful that was going to be. I just said I wanted to do something more than just have 8 people show up for a photo op.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was going to be that big.
Wow.
So when I was at Mother Caroline's Academy, I didn't appreciate what this was meaning. So, for example, the girls and staff said, think about what this means, that on my walk to school, I walk past all these black women every day before I go to the classroom. And so there's been other people, adults, whatever, and you remember how I told you the foundations didn't see it as public art? But the reaction to the banners has been the similar reaction you'd get for public art. So people have said, beautiful, inspiring, empowering, tears of joy. Just like one woman said, she said, I was turning onto the street, I saw a man with a camera taking a picture of something up there, which was a light. So I looked to see what it was. I saw it was a picture of these black women. And then I looked further down the street, and it was just black women as far as I could see. And she said, that gave me goosebumps.
Wow.
And she said, the hairs on my neck stood up. It was like, oh my God, like all black women. And so you think about this. How you talk about creating an experience for somebody?
Yes.
So if the banners actually start at Columbia Road and Blue Hill. So if you're driving in, minding your own business, you're driving in, and you start seeing black women, 2 of them on each light pole, both sides of the street, and you see that as you get to the Grove Hall Center, you're getting to the Grove Hall Mecca, but they keep going. And then you keep going down Blue Hill, and there's more, and you keep driving down Blue Hill, and there's more, and you keep driving, and you get past Merengue, and there's more. And so you're talking about from Columbia Road all the way to West Cotton Street. It's literally 2 miles of black women portraits on both sides of the street.
Wow.
106 light poles. So I'm just saying, like, I didn't imagine that experience, and so people just said that's overwhelming, because it seems like they said, like, you get the feeling like it's never going to end.
Wow.
And I say, yeah, but that's the point, is that black women's contribution goes on and on and on and on and on.
Yes.
So one of the things I said was, you talk about Irish Boston, Italian Boston,
right.
Brahmin Boston, right?
Yes.
The Cabots, the Cabots, the Lodges, the Lows, the Kennedys. And I said, but what about black women Boston?
Absolutely.
Boston would not be what it is today without the contribution of black women. So their collective impact and their cumulative impact over those 300 years. And the other thing I was just say, one of the challenges was finding the right artist for the project. Excuse me. So we ended up doing a call for artists, and we actually got artists from around the world who wanted to do it. Wow. But we had a particular style in mind that we wanted to use or follow. And in that particular case, what the simple question was to everybody who applied is, drew something that's as close to this style as possible. And so people would just send us our portfolio. They wouldn't pay attention. We'd say, that's fine, but that's not what we want. And we'd ask them to do it over again. And the part of the problem was, as I would say, is I needed somebody that had the talent of an artist, but the ego of a commercial artist. And in other words, a lot of times when you do commercial graphics, your name isn't on it anywhere, right? You're just back there designing stuff, and so you don't get to see your work, you don't sign your work, whatever. But because I had people from the 1600s, 1700s, I needed somebody who could actually draw and illustrate without being able to have an actual picture, like a tracing or something. And so I needed somebody who had fine art skills, color. Some of these things were like old newsprint, stuff was yellow, something was, a description of somebody, and you had to create something around that. So they really had to be a true artist. But the people who are true artists wanted to do their art style. So they had their own unique style that they wanted to do. And so we didn't want that because that's what I said in the beginning, is that then it would look like you could tell that which ones were done by which person. And so we needed them to follow a certain kind of style so that they all looked the same. And we found one guy early on, Kamali Thornell, and that was another person I think Jamal hooked us up with. But we couldn't find a black woman. I said, I can't move the project forward without a black woman. And I had white women from like Europe and stuff like that. And I said, I know they'd have my head if I said, I'm going to do this project. And they're going to say, how did you not find a black woman artist to do this? And you found a white woman from Italy or something. So anyway, took a while, but I actually found a black woman from Baltimore, actually.
From Baltimore.
And excellent. She did a great job. And, because, again, the thing was, this is the style we need. So you got to get as close to this as possible so I can have two different people creating the exact same look and feel for the whole project. But out of respect for them, what I told them is I said, I want you guys to be able to sign your artwork. So they're actually signed by the artist. And that's part of the reason why the project was as expensive as it was, is because it's 212 pieces of artwork. They're full color. Like if somebody sat down and did your portrait and sketched it for that many people.
Wow.
Now, by the way, so this was also picking up on a theme that from my executive director, Greater Grove Hall Main Street's hat, I was trying to promote public art. So the story there is I went to a Boston Society of Architects meeting, and they talked about that economic development was tied to public art. So at that time, the Boston, Boston whatever Society, whatever, I'm trying to think what it was called. Anyway, the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, they had a map of all the public art in the city. So there was like all these red dots downtown Boston, like all on top of each other. And remember, I'm thinking, okay, where there's public art in terms of economic development. So I said, let me take a look at Grove Hall. So I had like one red dot. And my quote unquote public art was a painted utility box. So there was actually some more art in Grove Hall, but they just didn't count it. But I said that spoke volumes. So then I got a grant, and we started painting utility boxes. We did 15 or 16 of those. We got some money working with the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture again. We did those murals that you see sometimes on Bluehill Avenue, like the black woman on Quincy Street that says "Love Thyself." Pro-blacks one says "Breathe life." There's one next to the library of Nelson Mandela, another mural. So anyway, so those were the things that came out of that. We renovated the sculpture, so the clock tower in Grove Hall is a piece of art. We got the money. It was like $60,000, $70,000 to renovate that, which we did because the city had basically abandoned it. And so we figured, okay, we have a piece of art right in the middle of our community. We got to take care of that. I did another project where I got a black photographer, and the deal was is that the bus shelters that we have in our communities?
Yes.
So where there's advertising space, we basically had all the photographers use that to exhibit their art, their photography. So now I had 24 pieces of art in a community again that you might not see otherwise. And so this was sort of like my version of using found space. So like in New York, they do graffiti on a sidewalk, they do it on trains, whatever. So they figure, like, okay, if I can't get in the museum and stuff, I'll just do it out here. And so I was finding more and more ways to bring art and provide opportunities for artists to be able to show their art here. You probably remember seeing the mural that's on Breeze's laundromat. That was a technique that I had invented. So I said, you know how they do the billboards? I said, why couldn't we, instead of a mural, why couldn't we do a billboard and then we could take it down and put up the next one? And so, because the issue was, if you're going to pay the artist a real wage, and they put all those hours and hours into it, then it becomes very expensive. But what if they already have existing art and you just need to make a print of it and then put the art up on the side of the building? So if you look at that building, what we've done is we've put a metal frame up, like you would do like a frame for a poster, or art, like a like artwork that's in a frame and then hanging on the wall. So that's basically what we've done is we've created this giant frame. We put the vinyl artwork there, and then we hang it on the side of the building. And so to kick it off, we used one of the artists that you just mentioned. We used Paul Goodnight and Larry Fish. And so those two came together, and they did a collaboration. We did another one with Echo Homes and London. And then what it was allowed us to do is put up the art. It could be up there for a certain period of time. Then we could take it down and put up another one, and we could keep rotating. Another thing that we did is we took the murals that we had up that I just told you about a second ago, and then we made those into posters, like outdoor posters, and then we put those up at the airport. So every now and then people will say, oh, I was in Terminal B today and I saw the art.
Wow.
And so because again, the idea was how do we give black artists an opportunity to get more exposure, et cetera, et cetera. And so now all those thousands of people who are coming to the terminal, they get to see that. And so it has the art from the artist, it has the name of the artist, the title of the piece, and then it has the location, so you know where to find it if you want to actually see it. And then it's sponsored by Greater Grove Hall Main Streets. And so, but anyway, so what I'm saying is that this last thing with the banners was in a series of things that we've done to promote public art. So there's like a history that sort of led up to that. It's just this was the most expensive, longest taking thing, and that's why I also said I feel gratified in some way that it's getting the reaction that you would if you were an artist and you had created something and people were responding to your painting, your sculpture, or your artwork.
It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. I mean, and so people who maybe are not from Boston, like this is incredible pride for Boston, incredible education, but for folks who maybe aren't, so I love the flashcard thing. That's something that, could actually be any place, but for folks to, I guess to be able to experience this, to understand this, is there any kind of a way that can be captured, that we can share this Boston history, that we're taking narrative of black women to be able to even go, across the country, even virtually? So
there's a couple things there. So one is I would like to see the Black Women Lead movement.
Yeah.
But let me explain. The idea simply is, I think, like right now or more recently, you see that the Democratic Party has come to appreciate the role that black women have played in voter registration, like especially in Georgia with Stacey Adams and things like that. But we see it across the country. And so there's at least that recognition by that group of the role and the importance that black women play. So what I'm envisioning and simply saying that with the Black Women Lead movement is have every city in town do something to visibly acknowledge the role that black women have played in their town.
In their town.
So therefore, everybody's a small town, large town, and you could do it the same way we did here. Pick your own leaders, pick your people, etc.
Now, are there main streets? Is that something that is a national thing, or is that just
so? Here? Main streets are national, but they're mostly rural, and so there's just now starting to be urban main streets. This is the kind of thing, though, I could see in some of the other urban main streets, like the one in D.C., New York. It would be possible that they could replicate something like this.
Wow.
So, I'm sorry, you were going to ask a question?
No.
So the movement thing has to do with two parts. So could we replicate it? Now, the other part is another black woman, Dominga Martin. She's talking about wanting to do some kind of a little documentary, behind-the-scenes thing to capture this. Her mother is one of the people that was selected, and that would be nice. I've thought about... do I have like a little drone that goes down the street and you see all the different people? Do we cut in and out? So I haven't thought about what the script has looked like yet. But I do think the idea of trying to create some kind of experience is what to what you're talking about. So if I was doing that list, like the flashcards, create some kind of a visual experience that people who aren't here could actually see it, and maybe they would be inspired to do something similar in their area. So maybe she will help me with that. I'm also looking at it from so again, remember how I told you that the funders didn't see this as placemaking?
Right.
So I'm also thinking, I said, what if we do this on the travel and tourism side, because in terms of as executive director of Greater Grove Hall Main Streets, I've had many times I've got a call, even this summer when the NAACP came and say, black groups are coming, they want to see something black in Boston.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to be able to say, look at this, like this street.
Was it here when the convention happened?
It was not, and I apologize for that. In fact, Josh Kraft wanted me to try to get it up by then because his father was actually speaking at the convention, but wasn't able to pull that off. But there's other groups that are coming. So I'd like to work with Meet Boston to see if somehow I can get this to be like a placemaking tourist thing where people come and they see it and it becomes an experience for while they're here.
Yes, we have the Freedom Trail, right? You got those things again, all that's downtown, but I love the fact that public art, and I didn't know that, thank you for the education, that public art is tied to economics.
Well, so see, I don't want to mean to get on a rant here, but I said, no, wait a second. If people in Grove Hall pay the same taxes, all those 2 and 3 family things, right? So if you're going up and down all those side streets, those are all houses.
Right.
I said they're all paying property tax. And I said, so where's their art? So why don't they have the same kind of amenities as if they lived in Beacon Hill, Back Bay, South End? Yes. So it shouldn't all be downtown.
That's right.
So we should get more art in our community.
I love it.
Music, art, like that. So that's why, if you remember, one year I did a summer concert series in Grove Hall Plaza. The Grove Hall Plaza is the space between Flames Restaurant and the church that's next door. There's a little parklet there. And so I brought in entertainers for the summer to set up. And because I said, if I was at Downtown Crossing, Milk Street, whatever, they have all those little, music in the park, luncheon kind of things. I said, why can't I have that in Grove Hall? So I applied for a grant and I did that.
Ed Gaskins, this is incredible. I'm so glad that you were able to come, and you have to come back, right? This is unfortunately our time has elapsed.
Oh no, I wanted to say one more thing.
Go ahead, 1 second, really, literally, because we got to go to station ID.
Oh no, not that again. Okay, so as a minister,
yes,
I want you to, you know how when they were crossing the Jordan, and they stacked up the stones, and then the people said, what do these stones mean? Remember it said in the future generations they're going to come along.
Yes.
And they said it's going to be
a memorial
of the miraculous God who cleared us the dry land so they can make it across.
Yes.
So see, I want to think of the banners as the same thing.
Absolutely.
So when you come down here and say, what do these, because we don't know who all these people are, but it's a testimony to the goodness of God that has brought us through, and all these barriers that all these people overcame. And like I said, I bet 99% of all the women, I know 100% of them are all women of faith, but 99% of them are all Christian women. Wow. And so, if you look at their bio, it talks about what they did, their day job, their protests, but they all talk about they had leadership roles in the church, deaconesses, trustees, right? They're all doing stuff. Wow. And so that's, for me, that's that memorial.
It is.
And then the second thing is, I can't help but think that when you read Hebrews 12 about that great cloud of witnesses, that it didn't just stop during the Old Testament, New Testament time, that some of these women that have gone before us are part of that great cloud of witnesses that are cheering us on as we overcome the difficulties from day to day, that they've passed the baton to us and we are passing it on to them, that we keep on keeping on.
I love it. I love it. I'm sorry, we got to go. You got to come back, brother. Thank you, Ed Gaskins.
Thank you.
Thank you, our audience.